Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. Today, guys, we're going to continue a great book we've been reading. All right. We read 9 chapters of this book already. The book is America, the Background of Columbus, being a survey of the revelations of science with respect to the Western Hemisphere and its peoples before its unveiling by Columbus, by Jennings C. Wise, Virginia Academy of Science, American Association for the Advancement of Science. All right. He's not just anybody writing a book. Before I continue, just make sure that you understand that we do have a playlist created of all the previous chapters we read of this book. The playlist is called the same name of the book, America being the survey of the revelations of, the Western Hemisphere. There's the playlist. There is already, again, 9 videos, 9 chapters that we have gone through. A lot of great information, a lot of deep info to pull out. We do have to dodge the hijack here and there, but in general, we can pull out a lot of good information out of this book with the knowledge that we have. And there's so many things we've gone over. I might have to rewatch this one day just to remember everything. So make sure you catch up. This is a great book. I have it in my Patreon page if you're interested in having a PDF copy, or just look for it online. It should be available for you. So we're going to go ahead and pick up where we left off. This was the last video right here, chapter 9. And it was, as you guys can see, more than a month ago. So we're going to get back into the book so that we don't forget about the book, right? So let's go to chapter 10 right now. So here we are. Again, chapter 10. And like all these other chapters, some of the titles of these chapters are very long. This is all the things it tries to cover. It says here that the chapter is called Pytheas Explores Iceland. All right. So-called Greek in Iceland, right? The Organon of Aristotle. Red men from America visit Rome. We actually gone over that before in other videos. Alexander the Great. Aristotle, Manetto, Asoka, Berosus, and the scholars of Alexandria and Rhodes. Pyrrhus, the Punic and Macedonian wars. Roman imperialism. Mithridates, Marius, and Sulla. So guys, remember our past research when it comes to Greeks, so-called Greeks. Remember, a lot of that stuff is from the medieval times. Remember, a lot of Greeks are different nations, are different people. They're not all the same. There's Israelites that became known as Greeks. Hebrew people became known as Greeks or Hellenized. So just keep that in mind. Remember that the timelines are a bit off. A lot of these so-called Greeks are actually from medieval times. All right. So either way, we're going to pull out the babies. I haven't read this chapter before. We're going to learn together. Be ready to dodge the hijack as always, but also to take notes and pull out the good info. Okay. And so it says here, someday perhaps a very different story of the golden age of Greece and the Roman Republic will be written from that which yet has appeared. And that's what we're talking about. All the history is not being told correctly about so-called Greeks and Romans. It has been glorified. It has been amplified. These weren't real empires, guys. Many people are so-called Romans. Not all Romans were the same. And many people became so-called Greeks. They're not all the same. All right. But let's continue. It says, in it, the golden land of Havilah, described in the Septuagint, will play a part. So remember, Havilah, that's literally in the Americas, guys. That was one of those mythical paradise lands, ancient lands where people came out of, like a Garden of Eden. And that was here in the Americas, guys. That's just like the Atlantis story or any other mythical land in the Atlantic. All right. So as they're telling you, the Septuagint actually mentions Havilah. And again, I don't know if he's going to say it, but we already know that was ancient America. It says, meantime, it is impossible to understand what followed the death of Pythagoras without noting historical facts. Some say perhaps a very different story of the golden age of Greece and the Roman Republic will be written from that which yet has appeared. In it, the golden land of Havilah. Oh, they're repeating this, guys. I don't know if you noticed that. They're repeating this part. All right. They made a mistake. So it says the ancestors of the Greeks, who had gained control of the oracle at Delphi, just as the Brahmins had taken over the sacred shrine of Delhi, had established the mysteries at Ephesus, and that's the coordinates, near Miletu, at the exact latitude of Colonus, the White Hill, overlooking the port of Colophont on the coast of Attica, just north of Athens, and Eleusis. Therefore, the connection between Ionians, the Celtic Athenians, and the Romans was complete when the Pythagorean founded the Republic of Rome. The story of Cincinnatus and how he saved the Republic in 458 BC is conclusive that already the Romans had begun to press northward when Herodotus published the Nine Muses. When following the death of Herodotus in 423 BC, Ezra and the scribes began to collect the Hebraic scriptures. The imperialistically minded Athenians, who had been led astray first by Pisistratus and the tyrants, and then by Themistocles and Alcibiades, for years had been relying on the rugged Spartans to defend Attica from invasion by the Persians, while glorying in the fact they did not raise their sons to be soldiers. So this is interesting. Like I was saying, a lot of so-called Greeks were actually Hebrew people or Israelites, like the Athenians, that was one of them, and the Spartans. So you see how it says that the Athenians were led astray, just like Israelites were led astray, right? And you see how they're dealing with their cousins, the Spartans. Yeah. Continuing, it says, already they had fallen victim to Sparta when Aristophanes undertook in the Lysistratus to deal with the unconscionable pacifist doctrine still alive, pursuant to which mothers would have other women's sons die for them. And when the Hindu historian Valmiki compiled the Ramayana, remember that's the story of ancient Mayas going to Hindustan, you can even see the word Maya in this name, Ramaya. In vain, Socrates had striven to reform the Greeks when in 399 BC, Plato witnessed the official murder of his great tutor. The Romans, cooperating with the Celts, were reaching out toward the North Sea when in 390 BC, just 6 years after they had captured and destroyed Veii, Brennus, and the Cimmerian Gauls, swept down out of the Low Countries, sacked Rome, and exacted a tribute in gold from the terrified Senate. This, of course, was not the result of a mere barbaric desire to loot the holy city. By this time, the Massagetai were among the Cimmerian ancestors of the Normans. Brennus, whose Gaelic name implied chieftain, was the hierarchic head of the Cimmerians. They did not mean to be overrun by the Celts in the manner the Slavs and Teutonics had been. As the allies of other Cimmerians who had occupied England and driven the Scoti either into Ireland or Scotland, where the Gadelic Picts and the Gauls had remained, they meant to dominate England. So again, a lot of context, if you haven't watched the other previous chapters or read with us, that you would be missing, but he broke down what he thought of all these people. All right, the last chapter, especially with the Gadelic Picts. Remember who the Picts are? There is an ancient connection there with the Picts and America. Where did the Picts really come from? All right. At this time, every Greek was familiar with the Theogony, wherein was told the story of Atlas and his attempt with the aid of Poseidon, Triton, and other titans to overthrow Zeus. With a striking example of the coast of empire fresh in the minds of the Greeks who had sacrificed the Republic of Solon and lost their liberties in the pursuit of empire, Philip II had appeared in the offing of Macedonia as a likely conqueror of Sparta, as well as Athens, when Plato and Theopompus of Chios showed how the giants of the past had always been conquered by smaller men with large brains. The Canaanites, the Atlanteans, the Ethiopians under Nimrod, that's the hijack with all these tags, right? Who are these people really? And the Ramessides, each in turn had suffered the irrevocable penalty and attempt to conquer the world had brought down upon them. Already, too, Plato had protested against the degradation of the mysteries and disclosed the exalted nature of the philosophy enshrined by their founders. What shall it profit a nation if it gain the whole world and lose its soul? Wow. Such was the sum and substance of the Timaeus Critias. But Plato also was warning the Romans not to sacrifice the republic, which Cincinnatus, look at that, almost sounds like Cincinnati, right? So where they get that name Cincinnati really from, had saved for them, as well as the Macedonians, when the purpose of Philip II became evident. Thanks to Homer, Hesiod, Pindar, Plato, and Theopompus, there was not an educated Greek who did not know what the Hebraic realm of Havilah implied when in 356 BC Alexander was born. Again, dodge the hijack with the fake timelines, right? These people might be from more recent times, like medieval times. At this time, Aristotle, and pupil of Plato, was the foremost scientist of Macedonia and was already engaged in the research upon which the Organon was based. Although the knowledge possessed by the Carian historian Herodotus, so Herodotus is Carian, huh? Carian, Carib, Carians. Remember my video about the Carians and how they just showed up out of nowhere in Asia? They don't know where they came from, but they say they might have come from Atlantis, and how there's seafaring people and how they might be related to Caribs. It says that Herodotus is a Carib, a Carian, an initiate of the Kabidi. Look at that. Caribi, Kabidi, right? Carib, Caribi, Kabidi. He's an initiate of the, Herodotus, huh? No wonder he said the ancestors of all ancient Greece come from a western distant land where all humans came from. Continues as the adepts of the Pythians and Eleusinian mysteries in Greece and of the Egyptian mysteries of Serapis. Dash the hijack, Thoth, man, that's some Thoth shit right there. Serapis were at his disposal. The great encyclopedia ascribed to him was necessarily but a compilation made possible by his pupils called Peripatetics, whose name implied walkers over the earth. The idea, therefore, that Aristotle wrote the Organon of his own individual knowledge, that he was any more than an encyclopedist of Philip II, is just another modern misconception. Among the Phocians of Marseilles at this time was Pytheas, who, while exploring the northern realms, determined with a gnomon the summer solstice at the 4 points of Ushant, Flamborough Head, Tarbet Ness and Ross, and the northernmost point of the Shetlands. Yet as we are asked to believe that only now did the Greek discover the sphericity of the earth, manifestly the 4 points mentioned related to the pre-existing geodetic system of which traces the same Tarbet, him Atma, the reincarnated word. By many it was supposed he had actually visited Iceland, which he described as a dividing place lying 6 days west of Britain. So this guy who's supposed to be an ancient Greek supposedly went to Iceland. Listen, now are they seeing this in reverse? Did he go to Iceland from the mainland, America, and then go to Europe and became known as so-called Greek? But either way, they're saying he went, and it's only 6 days west of Britain. So why wouldn't people from ancient British Isles go that way, right? It's that close. In the opinion of a great modern scholar, he was led to these by the Scots. So the Scots already had been in Iceland, huh? Who are the ancient Scots? Remember the ancient Scots coming from so-called Egypt, you know, the real Egypt, America, the real Holy Land. Remember who these people are? Remember my video, Israelites in the nations of Europe, and everything else we've learned on the book Ancient and Modern Brits, and the connection to the true old world Americas, and my video on Greater Ireland being in the Americas, and all the stories, right? If anybody was to cross the Atlantic first, according to the most famous navigation historian, it would have been from the Americas. The currents are stronger, the Gulf streams and everything, the winds are more favorable. It's 4 times harder to come back the other way around. So it's interesting that he's saying that the Scots showed him how to get to America or even Iceland, right? so-called Scots, who actually were coming from there anyways. That's why. Concurrently, the Greek Eudemanes explored the South Atlantic as far as Senegal, and in all likelihood visited the Azores, where the Carthaginians had been going since the times of Necho. Therefore, the Greeks were thoroughly familiar with the Gold Coast, which the Phoenicians at Cadiz and the Scoti, as shown by the Cross of Kong, the Piran round, and the cromlechs had known for ages, when in 349 BC Plato died, leaving Demosthenes as the champion of Athenian independence. All right, so just add a little context here. Remember, the true Gold Coast is in the Americas, guys. There's more gold there. They came here, they found so much gold, they took it, they still finding gold. Like, we gotta dodge the hijack, Anyways, but as usual in the case of materialistic people who want peace at any price, the pleas of Plato and Demosthenes had fallen on deaf ears when Aristotle, the pupil of Plato, became the tutor of Alexander of Macedon. Still, the Greeks believed there was a way to be rich without having to fight. Despite the warnings of Solon to Croesus, of Aristophanes and Plato, the Greeks ignored the pleas of Demosthenes and continued their efforts to placate the Macedonians, so that with their Ionian kinsmen they could loot the great caravan bases of Persians on the Black Sea. So you see how these so-called Greeks messing with other Greeks, and that's why I'm telling you, all Greeks ain't the same. You gotta have context with this, all right? It says, when in 339 BC Alexander donned the crown of Macedon, he was the most erudite potentate of the Western world. Before him were the ecumenical maps of the Persian Magi, showing that already during the reign of Darius, the Pyrenees had been occupied by the Celts and the Scythian ancestors of the Cossack, from the regions of the Don and the Caucasus. All right, who's the Celts, who's the Scythians? Remember all our past research. On one of these maps, both Marseilles and Sinope are located accurately, and also Syene and Meroe at the first cataract of the Nile, whence the Ethiopians are shown flowing westward into the Sahara, called the city of deserters. Also on it, the Indians are placed east of the Indus. East of the Indus, huh? Finally, the latitudinal circle, 36 degrees north, called the equinoctial sunrise in the east and the equinoctial sunset in the west, is shown passing through northern India, the Taurus mountain in Asia Minor, the Cilician Gate, the Triopian Cape roads, southern Greece, Sicily, and the Pillars of Hercules, which is the Straits of Gibraltar today, right? Meaning where Morocco and Spain literally almost meet, and before going out into the Atlantic Ocean. So obviously the Magi had located all these points with respect to the trinity of Karakorum, Kara, which means black, Karakorum. A second circle is called winter sunrise at the longitude of Amarakantaka in India. So listen to this. There's a place in India called Amaraka. Remember, we got this on a previous chapter. Amaraka. They're holding on to their ancient name, Amarakapana, Amarakataka, Amarakapana. Remember, who is the ancient Hindus of India or Hindustan, the Nagas? They came from the Americas. So Amarakantana in India and winter sunset west of Africa. Still, a third line in the north is called summer sunrise and summer sunset in the east and west, respectively, and above it appears the notation unknown mythical peoples. The unknown mythical peoples, and that's what I'm saying. Every time they talking about these legends, these unknown mythical people, mythical lands, that's America's, guys. So remember that this author does not want to fully subscribe to the origins of man and civilization to Americas, but he says that civilization developed in Americas. He said some Asians went over there and created civilization. That's what we read in the previous chapters. So even though he has all this drop, he's still adding a little hijack. So he's still going that, they're just finding out about Americas, or that somehow they already knew, and it's a myth, like as he's saying right here, unknown mythical peoples. So obviously somebody knew about Americas, right, and other parts of the world, right? Thus, it is evident that The old region of hell, doubtless upon the demand of Cimmerians, was being concealed by the Magi when Pytheas made his second voyage about the time Aristotle published the Organon. I remember that a lot of the times when they're saying hell is over there or the underworld or Amenti or anything like that, they talking about how the sun sets in the west and how the sun goes into the earth, like according to what people see, perspective, right? You see the sunset. So in ancient times, that would be considered that it's going into the underworld. That's what they saw the west as. So anything west, like the Americas, the Western Hemisphere, was considered Amenti, hell, the underworld, and a lot of mythology. Thus, it is evident that all region of hell, again, doubtless upon the demand of sinners, was being concealed by the Magi when Pytheas made his second voyage about the time Aristotle published the Organon, obedient to the policy of the Greek priesthood, who had served the hemlock to Socrates. In this encyclopedia, the current propaganda about the northern and southern zones of the earth being uninhabitable and the danger to seamen who dared sail too far west or east was included. In the north, there was forbidding ice. In the south, great fires, right? Tierra del Fuego, Antarctica, huh? I thought it was supposed to be ice, but you see how Antarctica is always saying that it's hot, fire. It was even called Tierra del Fuego, and even today, like the most southern part of South America, which almost touches Antarctica, is called Tierra del Fuego, or land of the fire. All right. Here there were gorgons, they're dragons. Look, guys, listen to what he's saying. Representing the Cimmerians and the Scandinavian pirati, who were still looting, the gilded man in their huge dragons. Wow. Is this real or are they talking about ships, huh? In the Mare Rubricum of the Romans, there was a great magnet that would draw the nails from the timbers of a ship, implying the inhibitions against visiting Polynesia. Such was the Masonic spoofing to which so-called modern scientists have fallen victim. Nevertheless, when Aristotle came to deal with Timaeus Critias, he pointed out that for years after the destruction of Atlantis, the Americas, right, the Western Ocean had been impassable, sea of mud. There's a whole story here about a part of the Atlantic that's so, filled up with seaweed or mud. And there was a time where it was so much that it was impassable. Like, remember when Plato told his story about Atlantis, he said it in the times of Atlantis, the Atlantic was navigable. So meaning that in his time, it was not. They couldn't cross the Atlantic. So there was a time when the Americas was kind of hitting in the Atlantic side from people going over there, right? So as Aristotle is letting you know right here, he said the same thing. That Atlantis, the Western Ocean, had been impassable, sea of mud. That's from the destruction, supposedly, right? Were the Mayas astronomers, all right? Who? The Maya, the Nagas, right? Were the Mayas astronomers who had erected the great observatories at Quito, that's in Ecuador. They're saying they're the same people, right? Chichen Itza in Mexico, and elsewhere in Yucatan and Anahuac, central Mexico, the ancient land, that's what it was called. Now participating in the survey which Pytheas, Etemenes, and another Exodus had been making. We only know about that by this time the Mayas were familiar with the mystery of the cube, which had been found in Mexico, and that following the last exploration of which Pytheas made no account, red men from the west, listen, red men, copper-colored tribes. Remember, he broke down what it meant when they meant red, brown, dark complexion. Red men from the west, said to have been shipwrecked, had appeared in Germany, whence they were brought to Italy by Roman seamen. And guys, we actually have a source for that. We have a video on this, right? It says that Christopher Columbus wrote that in Windsor. You see what Christopher Columbus mentioned? So-called Columbus, right? He supposedly mentioned that American Indians had washed up in Roman times, right? And we have a video on that, a whole different source than Christopher Columbus, not Christopher Columbus, but the Roman sources I showed, right? Don't forget Columbus, so-called Columbus. His real name is Salvador Fernandes Sarco, Sephardic Jew from Portugal. He also met Indians, shipwrecked in Ireland in the 1470s. So he met Indians before he went to the Americas. He was never lost, is what I'm trying to tell you. And he knew about all these Greek stories about the Atlantic and these mythical lands and lands over there in Atlantis, all that. So again, guys, he was very studied in this stuff. Continues, says possibly they were from Greenland. Possibly these Indians came from Greenland, right? They're saying possibly they were Abnaki or Abenaki Indians, right? This is, listen, this is a real story, guys. I have the video where Roman sources from those times are saying that they saw some strange people coming from the Atlantic, and they're described just like the Indians would be, right? It says the Abenaki here, cousins of the Irish. What? The Abenaki are what? Cousins of the Irish. You see? Who's the original Irish and Scottish that ended up there? Remember, the true old world is here. The land was out of the water first before Europe was just islands here and there. So that makes sense. And remember that in this same book, chapter 1, we broke down how the British Isles and North America were connected. That was called the North Atlantic Continent, or Ruta. Ruta. Okay? Remember that. So they're cousins, they're saying, of the Irish, or representatives of the Iroquois. 3 brothers and offspring. At any rate, now the myth first appeared in which Orpheus was said to have visited the realm of Atlas. All right, the realm of Atlas, that's the Americas, guys. ATL, that's an American word. Atlantis, Atalan, Aztlan, Atalan, man, that's our word right here. So Atlas, remember in the other book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America, which we have a whole playlist on. That was a great book to combine with this book. There's so much up in both books. We broke down how Atlas and a lot of these Greek deities and all that had to do with the Americas. So again, when Orpheus was said to have visited the realm of Atlas, that's the Americas, guys, and found that his wife had been killed by the bite of an adder. So we conclude Pytheas had discovered what had befallen the mixed descendants of the Isthias in America. Who? Look at this. You see the connection, guys? You see how important America, there is stories about this, and people who actually go to sources, they start concluding these things like this author did. This author's from the 1900s, but he had so many sources, right? He actually shows you guys all the sources that he uses to conclude what he's concluding. So you can go yourself and look at them, which is something that we do on this channel, right? So he's saying that Pytheas had discovered what had befallen the mixed descendants of the Isthias in America, even if he had not gone beyond Iceland. Well, that's conjecture to say he went all the way to Iceland and didn't go to the mainland, right? On the other hand, we may be sure the Peripatetics of Aristotle had learned all the red men had to tell them about America. So the Greeks knew about America, right? This is what I've been trying to tell you. When the eponymous Manetho of Egypt visited Greece and published a synthesis wherein the civilization of Egypt was carved by 10,000 solar, or one, was that million? Wow, esoteric years. So you see how they're saying 10,000 equals a million esoteric years? So when people are, given dates like, oh, it's 4 million years old, is it in esoteric years or in real years? And either way, nobody can really tell, like how ancients really took time and what they meant, right? But we keep an open mind, right? Such was the situation when at last, after conquering the Greece, the pupil of Aristotle set out to conquer the world. Soon defeated Darius at Granicus, seized Tyre, and having possessed himself of the Phoenician maritime base, also seized Pyros Island. So-called Phoenicians are seafarers coming out of the true old world. So at the eastern mouth of the Nile, thereby cutting the Greeks and Ancrates as well as Sesostris off from the west. When after destroying Darius, he proceeded against the council of Aristotle's nephew into Transoceania, we may be sure from what followed, just as he had gazed upon the mythical heights of Behistun and Elwyn and Ecbatana like Ramses II, he now beheld the colossi of Bamiyan, like a Bamiyan. In India, after defeating Porus, the army of Alexander received a clear warning not to venture into China and panic or panic-stricken, deciding to return to Babylon. But why did Alexander set out to convert this island city into a port and build a huge fleet? Was he planning to conquer the world that lay beyond the eastern dividing line? We only know that upon his tragic demise in 323 BC, Aristotle, who with the aid of Manetho had founded the Library of Alexandria, fled to Chalcis and Euboea, where he died within a year. So I know, guys, I'm going to keep trying to add context, and you might get confused if you're new to my channel or if you haven't watched any of my videos or even this series. You know, when they're saying he went to India, what India? Because there was 3 Indias, guys, especially in Alexander's time. The country we know today as India didn't get its name until 1940s, if you didn't know that. It was called Hindustan before that, or Bharat, right? So he could have been in the Americas, and there's like could have been, you know, we're conjecturing here, just like the author, but knowing this is the true old world, and there is it also, isn't there an Alexandria in Virginia? Anyways, continuing, these were mysterious times. The Persians had destroyed the Serapeum at Memphis. Again, what Memphis? The one in the Mississippi or the fake one? Now Ptolemy Soter, who obtained the government of Egypt upon the death of Alexander, founded the Greek dynasty and built the Serapeum at Alexandria to unite the Egyptians and Greeks. Also, he built the temples of Phoenix and Saturn. Phoenix, huh? In 316 BC, the very year the first lighthouse was erected at Alexandria as a symbol of the Enlightenment, the library had been created to shed upon the Western world. The Greek Evemerus published his Historia Sacra. Doubtless having been with Alexander, he declared he had visited the realm of Pangaea. Pangaea? Listen, Pangaea in the east. So they went to the eastern part of Pangaea, again, the Americas, right? And actually beheld there engraved on bronze tablets the history of the world, embodied in the Homeric myths and the Theogony. The gods, he said, were actual living men. Again, so they found the mythical lens, and they actually said that these deities were actually men. From the myths, the gods, he said, were actual living men whose records had been distorted by the myth makers. Wow, this is what we've been trying to tell you the whole time, guys. That in mythology, especially when it comes to Greek, Roman, all these mythologies, a lot of them are just talking about the ancient people of the Americas, who are the progenitors, who are the civilizers. That's why they became deities. They started doing ancestor worship, or they just started worshiping historical progenitors, historical people, right? This is big right here. He's telling you straight up that these people were actually living people. They weren't just deities and religion and hijack. They were real people. They had a real story, and people eventually created them and distorted the info and turned into myth. They're myth makers. You know, that's what they're letting you know. Ptolemy came to the aid of the Rhodesians, and saving them in 306 BC received the name of the Preserver. The Rhodesians? You mean from the Empire Rhoda, which was in Arizona? Rhodesians, huh? Rhode Island? This is what I'm trying to tell you. I know they keep trying to make us think that was all over there, but where is the true old world? Locations were changed, guys. Just like he's saying, people were distorted, real people, and turned into myths. Well, lands were distorted as well and put somewhere else in our modern history. Meantime, Demetrius, the Macedonian, had set out to overthrow Ptolemy, and having liberated Athens and Megara, had defeated the Egyptians. But when he undertook to seize Rhodes, where the Pythagorean mysteries had been enshrined, this was the age of the Alexandrian scholar Euclid, who about 300 BC published the Elements, showing a vast knowledge of mathematics, or Archimedes, a master of Hindu philosophy, and Charis, the hierarch of Rhodes, who in 292 BC, with the Colossi of Bamian as his motto, began the Colossus of Rhodes to mark the latitudinal circle 36 degrees north shown on the ecumenical maps. The year this grand monument, 105 feet high, was completed by the hierarch of the Rhodesian mysteries, 280 BC, To commemorate the defeat of the Macedonians, the Septuagint, including the Apocrypha, was published. So all this is happening. Look what's going on, guys. The Septuagint, which literally this is where they get your New Testament from. And I know a lot of people follow the Septuagint and the New Testament and think it's very historic and they love it and all that. But I'm trying to tell you guys, this is part of the hijack. We didn't need a Septuagint. We didn't need a New Testament. The Torah had all the info, had all the history, right? And they never said we needed a new. Now we're going into some other thing, but I'm just telling you, right? Greek, so-called Greek. Why did the Greeks know so much and want to create a Bible and all that? Because a lot of these Greeks were Hellenized Israelites, Hebrews that had become Hellenized, so-called Greeks, or Romanized, so-called Romans. Concurrently, Pytheas, with the aid of the elephants, sent him from India. So remember, we had elephants in America, and we're talking about ancient times here, right? So from India, remember, India didn't even get its name, the country today. It was called Hindustan. So why is it, what India are they talking about? Elephants from India, huh? Defeated the Romans at Heraclea. Was the mysterious Pyrrhus but a new Nimrod? A new Ramses the Great? Was the holy city of Romulus and Remus and the Republic of Cincinnatus to fall? Remember the connection with Romulus and Remus and the Inca? Remember, we got a whole reading of chapter of another book we read on that, So it's fulfilling the prophecies of Isaiah. A new Brennus gave the answer. Just as the Getae on the Brennus in 390 BC had swept down upon Rome, now the Massageti of the Balkans invaded Macedonia, coming to the very gates of Delphi. We need not concern ourselves with the myth that here Brennus committed suicide. Suffice it to say, the invaders had made the defeat of Pyrrhus inevitable. When some of them occupied Galatia in Asia Minor and founded the kingdom of Bithynia, thus recovering part of the realm from which their Israelitic forebears had been deported by Shalmaneser and Sargon II of Akkad. Your Tartarians. Remember that in Bible, a Tartan or Tartarian was an Assyrian military general, like these people, Shalmaneser and Sargon II. These are Tartans, right? That's a title, not a people. That's a title. And associated with military Assyrian generals. Okay? So, but they're telling you that these people's ancestors or forebears are Israelitic. This is what I'm trying to tell you. A lot of these so-called Romans and Greeks are Hebrews. All right, we got the whole drop. We got mad drop on that. So many videos explaining this in different ways. Defeated at Ascalon in 275 BC, soon the would-be conqueror of Italy, undoubtedly a secret ally of Carthage, was no more. Thereupon, the Romans were able to proceed with the conquest of Italy. So the Romans weren't always there. Remember, they were newcomers. There was already people in so-called Italy. A lot of those people, they call them, the Latins and all these other people, the Aboriginal. Like literally, there was a nation called Aboriginal. That's where you get the word from, guys. Their stories is that they came from Atlantis. So who are these so-called Romans conquering, right? Nevertheless, again, Sesostris raised his head. During the reign of Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, look at this. Look at his name, Philadelphus, Philadelphia, right? Philadelphia, this is what I'm saying, guys. Where's the true old world? East and West Numidia, constituted Massili and Massaceae, once joined to Sicily, came under the control of Egypt. Thereupon, as the ally of the Carthaginians who had seized Cadiz, this new Sesostris, who plainly meant to regain control of the Tyrrhenian gateway, began to extend his influence over Sicily, where Archimedes appeared to defend Syracuse against Rome. Syracuse, huh? Look at all these words, guys. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Syracuse, New York, huh? So, against Rome. Rome, who were the Iroquois? Why are they called the Romans of the West? Why do they have mohawks that look just like the Roman helmets? Why did they wear red capes just like the Romans? And why did they wear shoes? And they had their Robin Hood kind of gear and shoes and all that. Like literally, they dress like that, guys. You didn't know a lot of Indians dress like that. Anyways, let's continue. So he defended Syracuse against Rome and to agitate the Iberians against the Holy City. Under this threat in 264 BC, the Romans seized Sicily, whereupon the First Punic War began with the control of the Atlantic as the stake. While Archimedes, the greatest military engineer of antiquity, was helping the Syracusans, Callimachus was appointed by Ptolemy III in 252 BC librarian of Alexandria, and was said by the eponymous Lucidas in his lexicon, 975 AD, to have left behind him 800 books, including the Penacas, a catalog of the works which Aristotle, Manetho, and their successors had collected at the philosophical lighthouse of the Western world. Okay, so where is that, guys? You see, where are they collecting these books? In this mythical place in the Western world? Wow. History of the Literature of Ancient Greece, right? That's the source. From 1841. They got it from the Western world, huh? Among his pupils were the most celebrated scholars of his day, including Eratosthenes, Aristophanes of Byzantium, and Apollonius of Rhodes. His works included the Book of Causes, in which he pointed out the Hindu origin of Arabian astronomy and mathematics. The Hindu origin, huh? So remember, the Arabs, the pure Arabs, are the descendants of Joktan or Khatan, Yucatan, right? Khatan, Kate, Yucatan, Khatan Maya. Khatan or Joktan is son of Eber. Yucatan, it seems like they ended up in those parts, right, of the world. Hindustan, right, became known as so-called Nagas, became known as Arabs, huh? Or mixed with other people and then became known as Arabs, right? Because there was already people in these places that Joktan and his people were mixing with, that created the ethnicity or the people called Arab or pure Arabs from Yarub, the Himyarites and all these people, the Sabians, right? From the Catanites, right? Shout out to Drop, man. Shout out to Drop. He just did Prester John 164 or something like that. He's talking about the Catanites, pointing this out, what I'm saying. So this is very, very interesting right here. Again, his works include the Book of Causes, which he pointed out, the Hindu origin of Arabian astronomy and mathematics, showing he was familiar with the Saura Siddhanta, deemed the most ancient treatise on astronomy in India or Hindustan, right? It is seemingly almost incredible, therefore, that a modern writer, notwithstanding the serpent mantra in the Rig Veda, could have conceived that the rotundity of the earth was not discovered until the age of Plato. So again, we dodged the hijack with the spinning balls. That's kind of what they're trying to go with. But even if we were, like, whether people say a flat earth, it's still round, right? It's still a concentric circle. And we seems to be surrounded by an ice wall. That doesn't mean it's a ball, a spear floating in space and moving millions and millions of miles per hour. Like, that's all hijack, guys. You got to have a foundation. You got to be firm and steady. Okay? Don't be dizzy spinning on a ball. All right? Meantime, India had been thrown into great confusion by the Greek invasion. Countless Greeks like Evemerus and Callimachus had visited the Deccan and even Transoxiana. When just as the Punic War commenced, Binderasa, the grandson of Chandragupta, as the champion of True Cross, took the name Asoka and ascended the throne of Maurya, abandoning the lesser vehicle of Arhat, of which Guatemala had been the exponent. Guatemala, yeah, Buddha's first name is Guatemala. Remember, his mom is Maya. The Mayas, who is the ancient Nagas who brought this astronomy into the Arab people, right? It was ancient Nagas. It was people from America who taught the so-called Indians or Hindu people. So they're not going far back enough in this book, right? Abandoning the lesser vehicle of Arhat. Okay, so we got that. So abandoning the lesser vehicle of Arhat, of which Guatemala had been the exponent. This so-called Buddhist Constantine had already founded the greater vehicle today called Buddhism, in order to unify the much divided Hindus, Brahmins, and other sects of Asia. Now Guatemala became Gautama Buddha. Guatemala became what? Gautama Buddha, held by the new cult to be the ninth avatar. Concurrently, Berosus, the Chaldean Manetho, Chaldean, ancient Ireland, ancient Irish, an initiate of the Kabira, published his chronology, 250 BC, said to have been based on the lost books of Numbers, embodied in the Sphinx, the cube of Nippur, the mastaba of Saqqara, Esida, the planet tower of Borsipi, and Isagila, the house of the seven spears of heaven and earth, erected by Sargon II at Babylon. As the contemporary of Callimachus and Asoka, the great Chaldean historian carried the 10 divine dynasties of Chaldea back to 435,325 BC. Concurrently, Aristarchus of Samos undertook to calculate the distance to the sun, while Apollonius published a treatise on conic sections. Already numerous Buddhists had appeared in Asia Minor, which it is possible Asoka himself had visited when in 241 BC the Romans defeated the Carthaginian fleet. Now, I want to ask you something serious here, since it brought up Asia Minor. If there's an Asia Minor, guys, so where is Asia Major? Where's Greater Asia? If there's an Asia Minor, where's Greater Asia or Asia Major? I'm talking about North America, guys, what they're calling India Superior, guys. That is the Greater Asia, not minor. The words mean something very important. That's why it's being called minor, because it's not the original Greater Asia. But although Sicily, despite Archimedes, now became a Roman province, in 237 BC, the Carthaginians, who had long since seized Cadiz, overran Iberia while the Romans were subjecting Cisalpine Gaul. Hipparchus was now the high priest of Rhodes, reared in the shadow of the Colossus, pointing straight to the Colossi of Bamian and the Trinity of Karakorum. Unfortunately, his works, like most of those of Callimachus and Berosus, were later destroyed by the Christians, so that only a few fragments remain. Nevertheless, he divided the circle into 6 parts, showing, like Apollonius, his knowledge of the ancient hexagonic order of mathematics, upon which the Dendera zodiac of Egypt, the older zodiacs, and the Surya Siddhanta of the Hindus had been based. While it is evident he and Apollonius were both entirely familiar with the Book of Numbers, embodied in the cube of Nippur, he had referred to Anticton, the opposite world, and Anticton, Anticton, the opposite world, later dealt with by the Roman geographers, when in 225 BC, Eratosthenes, also the pupil of Callimachus, employing the age-old formula of the geodesics on the plain of Shinar, measured the equator with approximate accuracy. Almost concurrently with the final defeat of the Carthaginians in 201 BC, the Alexandrian Greek Crates erected a globe 10 feet in diameter. The thoughtful, therefore, cannot fail to envisage the likelihood that more red men, again, listen, that more Indians, copper-colored tribes, so-called red, copper-colored tribes, more red men, more copper-colored Indians had visited Europe when the Macedonian descendants of the Massagetae, who had possessed themselves of the Delphi oracle, undertook to seize Rhodes and silence the voices of Callimachus, Aristarchus, Hipparchus, and Eratosthenes, while Hannibal was invading Spain and Italy. The alleged suicide of Hannibal in Bithynia in 187 BC suggests that he had been disposed of by the cousins of the Macedonians. Be this as it may, determined to destroy the Jewish religion. What religion? Jewish is not a religion, it's a lineage, right? And Jewish is a made-up word. They talk about Israelites, right? Again, Israelites is not a religion, that's a people. right? That's a lineage. They practiced and kept the Torah, right? They followed the Torah. That's a commandment. That's not a religion. That's just the order, the natural order. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't try to worship other people that didn't create you. I am your creator. You get it? That's not religion. That's just natural law to follow, right? Anyways, in 70 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes, the king of Syria, seized Jerusalem and plundered the temple. And 2 years later, again desecrated the holy shrine. 2 years after this attempt to end Freemasonry, listen, 2 years after this attempt to end Freemasonry, the Romans, as champions of the true cross, ended the attempt of the Macedonians to destroy Rhodes by crushing them and putting an end to their kingdom. Rhodesia. Remember my drop on the Tucson crosses, talking about true cross, and the swords they found there from Rhodes or Rhodesia. That was supposed to be a Roman colony. But as you guys can see, the Romans destroyed Rhodes. They took over that place. That wasn't always a Roman colony. So they could be talking about that location in Arizona. This is what I'm saying. They got us thinking that all these places are all in other places of the world and, not here in the Americas, but we have a context. We have a background, right, that we should apply when we're reading these things, right? Use discernment, guys. So they destroyed Rhodes by crushing them and putting an end to their kingdom, the so-called Romans. Following the revolt of the Israelites under Mattathias in 156 BC. So Mattathias, that's Josephus, guys. That's Piso. Joseph of Mattathias, right? Supposedly the guy who brought down the guy. You guys know. Watch my Gospels of Piso series. So, following the revolt of the Israelites under Mattathias in 167 BC, Judas Maccabeus, the Maccabeans, right, reconsecrated the true cross in Jerusalem. The Maccabean Wars, right? Now, at last, the Romans, who saw in Antiochus an ally of Sesostris and Carthage, were determined to wipe out the seed of Moloch, the hijack. Accordingly, in response to the ceaseless demand of Cato, the Third Punic War was launched. At last, in 146 BC, Carthage was leveled to the ground. Thereupon, with Sicily, Macedonia, and northern Africa as Roman provinces, Pontifex Maximus went to the aid of Sparta, overthrew the Achaean League, destroyed Corinth, and subjected Greece and soon conquered Spain. About this time, the Pythagorean Apollodorus of Athens brought the Homeric myth and the Theogony into accord in his Bibliotheca in 140 BC, based on the chronology of Berosus, to which we owe our knowledge of the latter work. Concurrently, Posidonius, taking the time of Poseidon, god of the sea, appeared as high priest of Rhodes, and in continuation of the works of Polybius in Rome, wrote a treatise on natural philosophy and 15 books besides a discourse on the magnitude of the sun, meteorology, and also a commentary on the Timaeus of Plato, which he held to be true in all respects. Moreover, he was dispatching scientific expeditions to the mountains of the moon when another, Eudoxus, was said to have circumnavigated Africa from the Red Sea. And I'm going to say, what Red Sea? Because we know the real Red Sea was over here in the Americas, where they call it the Gulf of California, and it used to go all the way up. California at one point was an island, the state of California, attached to something else. Okay, and so when they're saying circumnavigated Africa from the Red Sea, you gotta have real perspective. To what extent the teachings of Posidonius with respect to Atlantis encouraged the Romans to abandon their old ideals can only be surmised. But this is certainty, just as Themistocles had done in Greece for years. Polybius had been ding-donging it into the heads of the Romans that to fulfill their destiny, the vanquishers of Carthage must conquer the earth. Consequently, imperialism was soon rampant in Rome. To the credit of the Romans, they were not hypocrites. making no effect to conceal the fact they meant to retain their republican institutions, institutions for themselves while denying them to others. You see that? What Romans? And who they copied what we call a republic or constitution today? They copied the Iroquois, right? Oh, the ones who were also referred to as the Romans of the West. And they had a great peace, right? The great peace, which is literally like the Magna Carta of the Romans to establish law, right, and peace. So they retained their republic institutions for themselves while denying them to others, only for them. Under the lead of the Gracchi demagogue, who cared nothing for republican ideals, the Roman mob began demanding a new deal that would permit them, despite Pontifex Maximus and the principle of the true cross, to share in the wealth, which, thanks to the pirati or the seafarers, was still pouring into Ireland and Scandinavia. Where they coming from, It is useless, of course, to imagine the descendants of the Hebraic Israelites, who in the time of Jeremiah had migrated to Spain, Ireland, and Scandinavia. Okay, we got the whole drop. Remember, Jeremiah is Olam Fotlam in Ireland. And he went with, was that Baruch? I forget. He was with him and the daughters of Judah, right? Queen Tephi, right? Who's Queen Tephi? She's of the Judah blood from the line of David. That's who Jeremiah brought over there, right? We have the whole drop. We got a whole playlist on this. So Hebraic Israelites who in the time of Jeremiah had migrated to Spain, Ireland, and Scandinavia, and that's from the true old world, from the Americas, did not know the implication of the golden land of Havilah. So it is useless, again, he's saying to really say that they didn't know of the Americas, right? The golden land of Havilah. It's useless to say that. These same Israelites, right? They came from there. Described in the Septuagint. Of course they knew that. The golden land of Havilah. The same is true with respect to the Masagetai of Scandinavia. They also know about America and how they relate to Israelites. And the Jatai, Ephraim and Benjamin, you see? These are Israelites. Of course they know where their promised land was. Who since their separation from the Masagetai had been occupying Dacia, Romania, and had produced the Goths, you see? Who's all these people? You thought were all white folks? This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. We're missing a lot of context. Scattered around the world means scattered to the four corners, right? That's what happened to Israelites. You see where they ended up? Different parts of them becoming different nations in history. So-called Saxons, so-called Govs, Jutes, all these people. So the connection of the Gracchi with America becomes plain when we consider their background. Okay, who's the Gracchi? They were the sons of Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, a Roman magistrate who had distinguished himself in Spain and Sardinia and who had married Cornelia, the daughter of the elder Scipio Africanus. Africanus, a Roman last name. I told you that's a Roman word, Latin word, had nothing to do with Africa. Both had served under Scipio Africanus Minor in Spain. Where? In Spain, not in North Africa. At that time and everywhere in Iberia, the rumor was rife about the pleasant land of Antillia in the west. Okay, guys, you see how we can't make this up? We already know that with that mythical island, Antillia. Remember, I have a video on this. Make sure you guys catch up to all my videos, all the drop. It's so much good info. We proved that that island is an exact match of the geography and territory of North America between the Mississippi River and the East Coast up to the Susquehanna River on the top and down into the Gulf of Mexico. Literally, that's what it's depicting. The Antillia in the west, you see that mythical land. So 25 says is the source dictionary of Greek and Roman geography from 1858. You see the sources are here. The pleasant land of Antillia in the west. We already know Antillia was in the Americas, guys. Like this, we're very advanced in this kind of research. So that's why when we read books like this, we should be able to discern a little bit. The author doesn't have the whole context, the whole research we have, but you see what she's saying, right? Oh, he is saying. In Windsor's opinion, this indicated the possibility that the Phoenicians and Carthaginians, who for centuries had been in the Azores and Cape Verde Islands, were visiting America, and the same was the conclusion of others. Man, body bag for the illusion, man. I can't make this up, man. I told you there is a strong connection with Cape Verde and America and American Indians and who they are. Okay? Even since ancient times. Yes, so-called Phoenicians, so-called Carthaginians traveling the whole Atlantic, the Americas, the true promised land, the true old world, they coming out of there. And yeah, they were going to Cape Verde. At one point, Cape Verde was part of mainland. You know, a lot of these islands are the tops of mountains that land that went submerged, underwater. But not all of it got submerged. The Americas is still here, was part of it. And you guys see the connection. You see, all these years we've been researching, we've been hinting at all this stuff. Look how one person has it in a book, this idea, this theory she has based on her research, right? But she's so correct when just seeing it in reverse. Just literally seeing it in reverse, and told the Cape Verdeans out there watching, you see there's a lot of history there with the Cape Verde Islands and the Americas, right? Body bag, right? It says in 133 BC, the elder brother, while trying to secure his election by illegal methods as a tribune, was killed with 300 followers by the Optimates under P. Scipio Nasica. And 12 years later, Caius Gracchus suffered the same fate while trying to be reseated as a quaestor in violation of the law and advocating extending the franchise to all Latins. All Latins. You see how this was some of the original people in Italy. They were called Latins, and a lot of the ones Aboriginals. From all this, it seems evident that they had not only challenged the vested interests, but had set themselves against Pontifex Maximus, whose duty it was to enforce the principle of the true cross, right, the religion. But there was still another factor involved, and a very important one. The business of banking had been highly organized in Asia Minor since the cycle of Hammurabi in Assyria. In both Athens and Rome, as early as 350 BC, men who would now be called bankers made a business of receiving money on deposit and of buying foreign money and bills of exchange, These are Semitic people in general doing this stuff, right? In Rome, where the Janiculum became the exchange, they were called Argentari. You see that? Argentina? Argentari. You see where they get Argentina from? That's a drop right there. So Argentine, they were bankers, they were money people, huh? Cryptos, who really is over there in Argentari, Argentina? Not patricians and without social status. They were largely Spanish or Portuguese Hebrews. Like I said, sounds like cryptos to me. And were despised by the nobles, and whose necessities they prospered, and were hated by the masses, who applied to them terms equivalent to buzzards, skinflints, and the like. Wow, they call on the Israelites there? Israelites from Spain and Portugal? The Hebrews, so-called Hebrews? Indeed, it was because of the ancient ill repute and distrust of those involved in handling money that the social ban was imposed against bankers until relatively recent times. You see, it was the Sephardics, and even before the whole Sephardic thing in Roman times, who's dealing with the money? Yeah, who's dealing with the wealth, the trade, the commerce? Yeah. Threatened by the New Deal of the Gracchi. Naturally, these exploiters of business and property constituted a powerful hidden force in the Roman Republic. To what extent their kinsmen and sweet Innis Falen and Scandinavia were financing the pirati may be surmised from the highly developed traffic in gold still common to these parts. But if Rome had fallen victim to the gilded man, and even the temple of Janus had become the state mind, this was not the worst. The wealthy were already employing slaves on a large scale, so that the employed peasantry flocking to the cities from the country estates and swelling the ranks of the unemployed were uniting with the urban democracy. Uh-oh, here comes democracy. They played the same role. They did the exact same thing in the North America, right? They played the same game when the second Gracchus was killed. So remember that, as it's saying here, even though they're talking about slaves, they're talking about servants with a contract. That's why they say it, so that they employing slaves, right? Employing means they hired them, right? Employing slaves. They were under indentures, especially if these are Hebrew people. They had a 4 to 7 year contract, just like the indenture servitude system. This, of course, was a direct challenge to the basic principle of every ancient religion and a direct challenge to the fundamental conception of Freemasonry. Oh, wow. Therefore, the inevitable happened. In 120, just 1 year after the second Gracchus was killed, and they're talking about BC most likely, again, hijack chronologies. So it says Mitra Datis called Eupator, Pator or Peter, right? Pator, Peter, that's where you get your popes from. Eupator, or you get Jupiter, right? Eupator. That's where you get the pastor and the pope. Appeared in Pontus, on the eastern shore of the Black Sea, to which Greek and Roman commerce long since had extended, and quickly subjected the people in this vital area, which included the entrepots of the caravan routes. Also, he conquered the Crimea and southern Russia. Having thus cut off access to the caravan routes, he invaded Cappadocia, Paphlagonia, and Bithynia, all tributary states of Rome, through Ionia and Greece. Just like in the Bible, Rome had colonies, and one of them was, a lot of them were Israelite towns, right? All over the world. And Asia, so-called Minor, we have a whole drop about, the Israelites going there, who they became, and, relationship to the people that they tell us with these names, these tags, It says soon the Persian Freemasons, had established the cult of Mithras. The Persian Thoth, Hermetic worshippers, Hermetic followers of Thoth, the Masons, Mithras, that's Thoth, man. The cult of Mithras at Tarsus and the various Antiochs, and were even threatening Ephesus and Rhodes when the Israelitic Getae, who had occupied the Hallstatt along the Danube, began to stir. Before long, they had driven out the Celtic Druids. Thereupon, the descendants of the Israelitic Massageti, all right, who's the Massageti? Okay, who had mingled with the Cimbrians. See how the Cimbrians and the real Cimmerian Cimbrians, remember I got a video on them? They were mixing a lot with the Danites and the other Israelite, like they kind of try to take the title as the chosen people, kind of like the Khazars. They are related to Khazars, the Cimbrians. So thereupon the descendants of the Israelite Massageti, who had mingled with the Cimbrians of the Low Countries and in Helvetia, began to assail the Celtic allies of Rome and Western Gaul. Therefore, we may assume the cry for help from the Druids was long and loud. So-called Druids, or Magi, Chaldean Magi, Druids, huh? Surely Pontifex Maximus would not allow the blonde beast to destroy the commerce of Rome with the North Sea. When this cry was raised by the Argentari and the big business of Rome, big business, unfortunately for the New Dealers, talking about hustlers here, talking about business, they too, like Croesus and the Greeks, in the time of Aristophanes, Plato, and Demosthenes, had failed to recognize that empire built and require a large, well-trained army. Fearing to bring into being such an institution, lest it fall into the hands of a dictator and be turned against them, they now sent untrained legions into Gaul. When 110 BC, they found themselves face to face with the Cimbri. This same year, Jugurtha, the son of Massinissa, seized West Numidia, where he defeated a Roman army. Although Sulla, representing the Republican ideal, managed to capture this rebel, in 107 BC, Cleopatra, the widow of Ptolemy IX, who had succeeded to the throne of Egypt, right? real Egypt, ancient America, where her son Ptolemy X had already expelled the latter in BC 107. So again, remember all these artifacts they found in Burroughs Cave and the mounds, the Grand Canyon, so-called Egyptian, in Illinois, in caves in Illinois, Michigan, the Michigan tablets, all that. Just picture like these are the same people they're talking about, guys. Within a year, the untrained legionnaires under Marius, representing the democracy, were almost exterminated by the Cimbri in Gaul. See, the Cimbri, huh? What part had the pre-Celtic Irish and the Cimbrians in Britain and the Armoricans, Armericans, take the R away and put an E right here. You get Americans. Armorican, the Gaelic, a lot of the Gaelic is related to Gaelic going back to Semitic or Hebrew. Remember, we got videos on all this. How does that tie into the mother tongue of the Americas, right? And the Armoricans in Brittany, in France, with their great navies taken in all this, with their great navies, the Armoricans, they spoke the Armorican language. How can you take all their navies, huh? We do not know. We only know that the blonde beast already had made the Gaelic man and geographed the symbol of the heron Volk when in 106 BC the elder Cicero and Pompey were born. That Latin Rome was at last involved in a life and death struggle with the Teutones, which from the time the blonde beast tasted the blood of Rome was never to end. And that's the end of this chapter, guys. Brief little reading for today. I hope you guys, enjoyed the reading of this book. Another chapter of it. That was again chapter 10. And again, this was the book, just in case you came late. America, the background of Columbus, being a survey of the revelations of science with respect to the Western Hemisphere and its peoples before its unveiling by Columbus. This is by Jennings C. Wise. You get all his accreditations, degrees, and then he's a Virginia Academy of Science member and American Association for the Advancement of Science member. So we're not just talking about anybody just making up things. He's trying to use sources. He knows there is a strong relation with the old world people and America. He's making a lot of connections. He or she, right? But we have a lot of more context. This is the true old world. They're seen in reverse. That's why there is so much correlation and connections. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this chapter as well as the other parts. Make sure to check out all the previous episodes. I'm going to go ahead and show you again. This is the playlist. All right. All the previous chapters. We got a lot of good drop, actually. Some of them are more longer. Some chapters are longer than others. But, we're going to keep going until we're finished. We're pretty much like more than halfway through the book. So congratulations to you for reading almost a whole book. Again, we're almost there to the end. We're going to get the whole drop. Eventually, we're going to use all these clips for further research. So we're just creating a database right now, right? Breaking down the chapters. So I hope you guys enjoy that, right? Thank you for sticking around all the way to the end of the reading. Thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate you guys, all the support you have given me throughout the years. Thank you for that. Check out my Patreon page if you want to support me in any way, my channel membership as well. Thank you for any members of my Patreon or channel. I really appreciate you guys a lot. Thanks for holding me up, really. So much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.